Mr. Speaker,
Order. Questions for oral answer. Ms. Foo Mee Ha.
Mr. Speaker, the proposed Johor-Singapore Special Economic Zone has the potential to strengthen the excellent economic relationship between Singapore and Johor. A special task force has been set up to study the broad areas of collaboration. We will provide an update on its progress at the 10th Singapore-Malaysia Leaders Retreat scheduled later this year.
Ms. Foo Mee Ha.
Thank you, Speaker. I have two SQ supplementary questions for MOS. This is not the first time Singapore has been involved in special economic zone development with other countries, having been involved in developing industrial spaces in Asia since as early as the 90s in China, Vietnam, and Indonesia. So I'd like to ask the Minister two questions. What lessons can be drawn from our previous experience to ensure positive outcomes for Singapore under the Singapore-Johor Special Economic Zone? And two, the success of special economic zones depend heavily on incentives, policy innovation, and experimentation to attract businesses. So I think it's important to know how can we ensure the setup of the Singapore-Johor Special Economic Zone will not impact the competitiveness of Singapore's own export sector. Thank you.
MOS Low.
Thank you, Speaker. I want to thank the member, Ms. Foo Mee Ha, for her two supplementary questions. The second one is on our export competitiveness. Let me tackle that first. Ms. Foo Mee Ha will agree that Singapore and Malaysia enjoy very strong bilateral ties. And when it comes to Singapore and Johor, this particular Singapore-Johor SEZ, the comparative advantages of both sides of the causeway have attracted companies to set up complementary functions in Singapore and Johor to serve their regional and global operations as well as customers. And I want to share with her and the members of the House that, in fact, Singapore Economic Development Board, alongside our Malaysian counterparts, actually helped land some of these several significant projects in Johor last year after COVID measures were lifted. Just allow me to quote one example in the interest of time. For example, SBC's group we work with them to have a cold chain halal certified factory in Nusa Jaya Tech Park, NTP. And this will allow them to produce 100 items such as bread, cakes, and desserts to supply to Paris baguette outlets in Southeast Asia countries. Now, I think we are quite familiar with this brand, and in fact, this particular company hires more than 300 staff in Singapore. So this is a good example to show how we can, by leveraging our comparative advantage on both sides of the causeway, we are able to complement our collective value proposition. And so we look forward, on the second supplementary question, we look forward to the prospects to strengthen the nexus with Johor, to foster closer economic cooperation and the chance to explore areas of synergies to benefit both our countries and both our people. And then, on Ms. Foo Mee Ha's first SQ, I want to assure her that the Johor-Singapore Special Economic Zone actually sits under the auspice of what we call the JMCIM. And the JMCIM was set up 16 years ago, 2007, and it was set up by both our Prime Minister, and they've been meeting every year. The Malaysia-Singapore Joint Ministerial Committee for Iskandar Malaysia, in short JMCIM, held the 16th meeting recently, slightly more than 2 weeks ago, on the 14th of July, in Singapore. And at the sidelines of the meeting, and this meeting was co-chaired by Minister Desmond Lee, Singapore's Minister for National Development, and the Malaysia Minister for Economy, Minister Rafizi Ramli, and it was agreed by them during the meeting that Singapore and Malaysia will set up Johor, Singapore, SEZ, basically set up a task force to study the establishment. Let me read that again. It was agreed during the meeting between the two ministers that Singapore and Malaysia will set up a task force to study the establishment of Johor, Singapore Special Economic Zone, JSSEZ, to do a few things. Number one, to drive economic growth. Number two, to strengthen economic connectivity between Singapore and Johor. And number three, to promote collaboration for the mutual benefit of both countries and our people. Now, I'd like to add that the Johor-Singapore SEZ, if it comes about, if it's established, it will build on the good growth of Johor and Singapore's significant investment in the region. She asked about what lessons can be drawn, so I've explained that the JSSEZ will sit under the auspice of JMCIM. And in fact, if I could use the data points post-COVID, since COVID measures were lifted, in fact, from January to June 2022, Singapore was Johor's second largest foreign investor after Japan. And in fact, during this period, Singapore contributed to around 70% of Johor total FDI in the manufacturing sector, with about 3.97 billion ringgit investments, most of which come from investments in electronics, E&E, as well as medical equipment sectors. As I shared earlier, it is complementary so that we can anchor regional headquarters activities here. We can also anchor R&D activities here, supply chain management here, so that our Singaporean workers here are well placed to perform this function to help the companies manage, integrate, orchestrate their pan-Asian operations. I want to assure her that the JSSEZ will build on the foundation set by the various JMCIM work groups to drive sustainable growth, develop human capital, and to improve infrastructure and connectivity. We will certainly provide an update because the meeting just took place 2 weeks ago. We will certainly provide the House an update on the JSSEZ during the 10th Singapore-Malaysia Leaders Retreat scheduled later this year.